Well, good day and welcome. We're in for some exciting times. Why is it exciting? Because we're doing a little bit of mathematical literacy, and there can be nothing more exciting than maths literacy because it's real life, everyday stuff that we deal with. And I'm particularly excited today because we're going to tackle the subject I enjoy the most, and that is the subject of shape, space, and measurement, right? So we're looking at space, shape, and measurement. In other words, we're looking at LO3, or Learning Area 3. Now, let's have a look at our screen and see what this actually consists of. So, overview of space, shape, and measurement. There are three areas we're going to be looking at. The first is perimeter, the second, area, and the third is volume. Now, this whole section that we're going to be dealing with, we need to understand one thing, that when you ask questions in the examination, and we're going to be looking at questions much later on, but when we look at questions, it's very difficult for an examiner just to test a perimeter, and just to test area, and just to test volume. Right? Normally what happens is they put it all together in one question. So they're going to give us a big story, and then in that story they're going to say, right, calculate the area. Now, what's the perimeter? Hey, what's the volume? Okay, so that's the first thing you've got to understand, that even though they're three different sections, when they tested, we tested as one whole section. Let's look at them individually quickly. Perimeter. Now, there are a few key concepts we've got to understand. First of all, perimeter is the length of the outside of a shape. So, were I to give you a shape, let's say, for example, this piece of paper, and I wanted to know what is the perimeter of this piece of paper. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to measure the length from this corner to this corner, from this corner to this corner, and to that corner, and then finally back to the beginning. And I'm going to add up those measurements. Now that is what we call the perimeter. Okay? Important concept to understand. Sometimes we can give you the perimeter or ask you the perimeter of a circle. Now, the perimeter of a circle is known as the circumference. So there are two ways to ask that question. What is the perimeter of a circle, or what is the circumference of the circle? It's the same question. So that's a little thing we've got to remember. Now, important concept, and you're going to see this coming up time and time again. Always change all measurements to the same units. So if you are given a question, and we're told that the length, let's go back to our piece of paper, the length from this corner to that corner is 25 centimeters. And the length from this corner to that corner is, let's say, 200 millimeters. Oi, we got a problem. Because we're dealing with centimeters, and we're also dealing with millimeters. And we cannot do that, folk. So that will be rule number one. Always, always change your units to the same unit. You're either dealing in millimeters, you're dealing in centimeters, you're dealing in meters, or you're dealing in kilometers. But you can't deal with a little bit of this unit and a little bit of that unit. You're setting yourself up for failure. You are going to mess up that question. So let's remember that. Now, for perimeter, we spoke about units. The units can be millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers. Those are the units we generally deal with, and I'm sure you're not going to come across any other unit in any test or exam question. Okay? So perimeter, millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers. And while I got your attention on that, let's just have a look at this very quickly, because this is an important concept. Now, if we were to ask you to change millimeters to centimeters to meters to kilometers, there's a 10 by 100 by 1,000 jump. Okay? What do I mean by 10, 100, 1,000? Let's look. Millimeters to centimeters, we're going 10. Centimeters to meters, 100. Meters to kilometers, 1,000. Can you see? We keep adding a 0. 10, 100, 1,000. So there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter. There are 100 centimeters in a meter. And there are 1,000 meters in a kilometer. So were you to get given a question where you're given millimeters and also kilometers, and you got to change those millimeters to kilometers, what you would do then is you would say, right, I'm timesing by 10, I'm timesing by 100, and I'm timesing by 1,000. So it's a very simple rule, folk. 10, 100, 1,000. Got that? And you'll see we're going to use that later on when we go through a few questions. Right, so that's perimeter in a nutshell. Remembering the outer measurement of a shape. So we're just adding the whole shape. And our shape doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle. In fact, let's have a look here. I could actually give you a shape that consists of a type of rectangle or half a rectangle. I could then give you a bit of a triangle, okay? I could then say, hey, let's get rid of that line and let's add a semicircle. So now I could say, let's find the perimeter of this whole shape. So we start here, we measure there, we measure there, we add that distance, we add that distance, and we add that distance, which is half a circle. We'll get onto the problems later on, but as long as we understand the whole idea of perimeter. Now, let's have a look at area. So, few key concepts. Always use the formula given in the question. Later on when we go through questions, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again. Your examiners at the end of the year are extremely nice people. They will never give you a question on area or on volume unless they give you the formula. So folk, if you see a question and there's a formula in that question, you are going to use that formula. And if you don't, chances are you've made a mistake. So always use the formula given in the question, okay? Always. No examiner wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and says, how can I confuse my students? I know, let's throw in some arbitrary, funny little formula. Examiners don't do that. They are lovely people. They're only going to give you the formula that you need. So you see the formula, use it, always. And I've highlighted that, and that is so important. Okay. Area, we're dealing with two-dimensional shape, okay, normally with a length and a breadth, or a length and a height. So, for example, if I were to draw this, area, we are saying, right, what is the area of this shape? In other words, if I wanted to paint this rectangle, how many centimeters squared or how many meters squared would I need? In other words, to calculate the area, I need a length and I need a breadth. Or I need a length and I need a height. Got that? Always. Again, remember in perimeter we spoke about this? Same applies in area. Always change all measurements to the same units before starting any calculation. And then, what units do we use? Do you remember, for perimeter, we said we are going to use millimeters, or we're going to use centimeters, or we're using meters, or we're using kilometers. Now, in area, because it's length times breadth, it's a two-dimensional shape, we are going to say it's centimeters squared or millimeters squared, meters squared, kilometers squared. Important concept. So what are we going to do when it comes to volume? Hold on, don't get excited. Let's wait, we'll get there now. Okay, so just quick overall, always use the formula when it comes to area, understanding it's a two-dimensional shape, so we got a length and a breadth, or a length and a height. We always change the measurements, and we must remember our units are either millimeters squared, centimeters squared, meters squared, or kilometers squared. Right, on to volume. Next thing. Again, I've put it here again, straight up. Number one, always use the formula given in the question Folk, I can't stress that enough. In fact, you're going to be sick and tired of hearing me say this all the time. If I see a formula, use it. If I don't see a formula, chances are I don't need one. Ooh. That is like phenomenal stuff to remember. If I see a formula, use it. If I don't see a formula, chances are I don't need one. Now, there are volume, we're dealing with a three-dimensional shape, normally a length, a breadth, and a height. Again, please, always change all measurements to the same units before starting any calculation. Now, with units, again, remember, when it came to perimeter, we said we are using millimeters, we are using centimeters, or meters, or kilometers. Let's get that K right. With area, we said it's squared. We put little 2's above the millimeters, above the centimeters, the meters, the kilometers. With volume, though, because it's length, breadth, and height, we've got 3 sides. So we're going to say millimeters cubed, centimeters cubed, meters cubed, or kilometers cubed. Happy? A few study hints for you. Now, we said we're dealing with space, shape, and measurement. We are always to use the formula given in the question. You must always change all measurements to the same units. In perimeter, we're dealing with millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers. Area, we're dealing with millimeters squared, centimeters squared, meters squared, or kilometers squared. That should be a kilometer, not a meter. So we're dealing with kilometers squared. And volume, millimeters squared, centimeters squared, millimeters cubed. Here I am making the mistake. Centimeters cubed, meters cubed, or kilometers cubed. Finally, remember to end your calculation by placing the correct units in place. In other words, folk, if I am dealing with a box and I want to know the volume of that box, and I give all the measurements in millimeters, my final answer must be in millimeters cubed. So if the answer is 40 millimeters cubed, I can't just say 40, because I'm telling the examiner, hey, I am clueless. I have no idea the units I should be using. I have no idea that the unit should be cubed, and you are going to lose a mark for that. So if I'm dealing with perimeter, my final answer must be 40 millimeters. Area, 40 millimeters squared. Volume, 40 millimeters cubed. Happy? Finally then, let's just go over this very, very quickly. Space, shape, and measurement. Always use the formula given. Always change the measurements to the same units. Perimeter, we're dealing with just the units by themselves. Area, we're dealing with the units squared. Volume, units cubed. And finally, remember to end off with the correct units in place. We're going to take a short break. What I will say is this, we're going to come back and now we're going to tackle some of the problems that were in last year's paper. In other words, the November 2010. And we're going to see now how we're going to take this information and actually apply it all into some of the questions that were given. Okay, don't go away, take a short break, and we'll be back soon.